Assalamualaikum and welcome to the Harpoon Islamic Study Circle, Seerah session 143, which I think is the fifth session we're doing on the treaty or the war of Hudaybiyah. And just putting it into context, inshallah again, this is, and the context is really important because of the transformation that happens before and after Hudaybiyah. So Hudaybiyah happened after Khandaq. Prophet ﷺ said, we now have a more aggressive posture. He changed his foreign policy. The facts on the ground have changed. So he wants to have a more assertive foreign policy. So as part of that, he says, we're no longer going to sit back and be attacked. We're going to take the fight out. So here, one of his actions is to try and test the resolve of the Quraish. So they're challenging them on one of their major value systems, which is looking after the pilgrims, and that's where they get their prestige from, and that's what the Prophet ﷺ wanted to challenge. So they set out 1,400 Muslims to go to Hudaybiyah obviously as pilgrims, or dressed as pilgrims. They've taken their animals, sacrificial animals, and so the scene is set for a showdown. In all other instances, the Quraish they're obliged to let the pilgrims come and perform their ritual duties, but this was just too much for them to take. So as we've said before, they tried to provoke the Muslims by sending out a platoon of people to try and manufacture conflict. That didn't work, and then the Prophet ﷺ, he captured them, sent them back, and then he camped. He redirected their route, and he camped out at Hudaybiyah, and deciding what to do. And then negotiations, essentially the first lot of negotiations, they begin, and you've got people like Budayl al-Qudai coming from the Quraish and trying to find out what the Prophet ﷺ wants. Why is he here? And then he tells them, we're here as peaceful pilgrims, just want to do Umer and then go back. And the Quraish don't want to listen or negotiate because of the shame that this episode is going to cause. And then someone from amongst the Quraishi allies, Urwa ibn Masud from Banu Thaqif of Taif, he goes and he meets the Prophet ﷺ, and Prophet ﷺ listens to the insults that Urwa has, and then Abu Bakr says something nasty, and then Urwa, he doesn't say anything, and then Urwa, he goes back to the Quraysh and say, look, right, and he was the chap that was slapped by his own nephew, slapped his hand away when he was trying to reach the beat of the Prophet. He goes back to the Quraysh and says, look, I haven't seen people so devoted to the Prophet as this. I haven't seen devotion like this anywhere before. These people would lay down their lives for the Prophet. And so he advises them, let them just do what they want. And the Quraysh treat him badly. So then Banu Thaqif, they withdraw their support from the Quraysh. Prophet then decides to send Quraish bin Umayyah from the Qaza tribe, but then he gets attacked by a mob just as he's entering Makkah, and he has to come back. And the Quraysh send Al-Khulais ibn Qama from Banu Kinana, and the Prophet knows who Khalife is, and then he just tells the companions just to march in the ihram and send the sacrificial animals through the valley so you can see them. He sees that, he goes back and says, you either let them do the pilgrimage or I'm withdrawing my support, and so he withdraws his support. So then the Prophet decides to send Umer bin al-Khattab because no one's going to mess with him. But then Umer says, look, it would be a better choice to send Uthman ibn Affan. And Prophet agrees. So Uthman enters Makkah. He's given protection by his cousin, and then he goes systematically to the heads of the Quraish, and probably go to Dar Nadwa as well, the leadership, the parliament essentially, and basically tries to negotiate or explain the Prophet ﷺ's position. But the consistent message coming back is no pilgrimage this year, right? Because, and they say, they can't deal with the humiliation from the rest of the Arabs if they let the Prophet ﷺ do this. So then Uthman, on orders, he's been told to go visit all the imprisoned and tortured Muslims who were converts who were left in Makkah, and he does that. It takes his time, and he's not back so soon. And so rumours start to spread that the Quraysh have done something to him, and then maybe he's died, and then it becomes quite a strong rumour, fake news, that he's been killed. So the rumours of his death spread amongst the Muslim camp, and the Prophet ﷺ then takes. He's been ordered by Jibril to take a pledge of allegiance, of fighting, from all the pilgrims, and so that's essentially where we stopped at the end of the last session. So the Muslims, they've come for pilgrimage. They're not armed for battle. They're, in the normal sense of things, they would be allowed to go to their hometown, many of them, the Muhajirin, and perform Umrah and sacrifice animals and come back. I mean, it wasn't such a big ask. And now they've seen how the Quraysh have dealt with some of their emissaries, and now they fear that Uthman has been killed. And if they can do this to Uthman, who's one of the most noble people there amongst the Quraysh, certainly amongst the Muslims, then this is completely unforgivable. This is in the sacred months as well, So the Muslims, they realize that, well, actually, this could be war, so the Prophet ﷺ insists on taking a pledge of allegiance, or an open-ended pledge, or a pledge of fighting, a pledge of war from everyone there. So the Prophet ﷺ, he's calling them for battle, and again, putting it into context, there's only 1,400 of them, and again they had a very small guard guarding them, but essentially there's only 1,400. They're not armed, and the Prophet ﷺ is saying, us 1,400, we've been traveling for weeks, we've been camped out here for a few days, let's go launch an attack on Makkah. And that is essentially, it's not quite a suicide mission, but it's almost a no hope situation. The people in Makkah, they're well armed. They're expecting some hostility. And remember, we had Khalif bin Walid being sent out, tried to prevent the Muslims from coming. It's their home city. They've got the equipment. They're rested. It's not as if their food and water is dwindling like the Muslims. And so 1,400 of them attacking 2,000-3,000 Quraysh, at least. It's going to be a very bad situation. And the Muslims knew that, they recognized that. But when the crier, was announcing that everyone needs to give a pledge to the Prophet ﷺ, because Jibril had ordered this, they all rushed to do it. And so we talked about how the Prophet ﷺ, he went first to the area of the camp where Banu Najjar was, and there's a tree there, and he sits by the tree, and he starts taking the pledge. And the pledge is done in those days, and again in the Sharia, for example, when you give the pledge to the Khalifa, you put your hand in their hand and you pledge allegiance with them. So it's a proper a tactile process, and it's a formal action. So that's how the oath is taken, and they are all they're not sure what they're pledging for. Some of them are pledging. Some say the pledge was to fight the Quraysh and not to turn back. Right, and again, the odds are against them. Fight the Quraysh and not to turn back. Some of them gave a pledge to fight for whatever is in the Prophet's heart. So it's essentially a blank check. We'll do whatever you want, right? No turning back, and they're all psyched up for this. And so one by one, they're coming, they're putting their hand in the Prophet's hand, and they're pledging allegiance. So, and we talked about how one of the ladies, she took the a tent pole out, and she took a dagger, and she was all psyched up, and gave her pledge. And then it was, if she'd seen any of the polytheists, she would have rammed them with the tent pole and stabbed them with a dagger. So you can see the emotions that people had. And again, we'll come on to this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to this in Surah Al-Fath, where he says, certainly Allah was pleased with the believers when they gave the pledge to you, Muhammad, under the tree. References the tree, will come back onto that. And he knew what was within their hearts, so he sent down tranquility upon them and rewarded them with an imminent conquest, or an immense conquest. And again, we'll talk about that later on, inshallah. That refers to Khaybar. It's said in the books that Umer ibn al-Khattab, he was holding the Prophet's other hand, and Maqil bin Yasir was holding a branch of the tree up. So it's like providing some shade, or some surrounding for the Prophet. And people are taking their pledge, except for one hypocrite who didn't, and he hid behind the camel, and he was, mentioned this before, he was the owner of the red camel. When process, I think this will take a few hours of 1,400 people physically coming up, giving that pledge. The Prophet then took his own hand and put it in his hand and said, "This is on behalf of Uthman ibn Affan." Right? So this is the Bayatul Ridwan, right? The bayah of Allah's pleasure, essentially. So it shows us the psychology of the Sahabi, the willingness to put the money where the mouth is. They're unarmed, they're defenseless, they've been traveling, they don't have proper weaponry, yet they're willing to fight to the end, right? To people, who are their sworn enemies, and so this, and Allah says He knows what is within their hearts. It's not them giving a half-hearted pledge or just doing it for the sake of showing off so other people can see it, or the feeling proud. This is genuinely, all of them apart from one hypocrite, all of them really were in the zone. And again, we've mentioned this before, that's why the status of the people of the Bayatul Ridwan, they are elevated and second only to the people of Badr, right? So you've got the prophets and the Sadiqeen, and then you've got the 10 who were granted paradise in their lifetime, the Ashra Mubashra, and then you've got the people of Badr, and then you've got the people of the Bayatul Ridwan. Okay, so Allah is pleased with them. Allah knows what is within their hearts, and so Allah revealed Sakina, peace, in them. And Allah says He has placed their hand above their hand. So as they're taking a pledge, Allah says that, metaphorically obviously, His hand is above that, right? So just think of the enormity of that statement from Allah above the seven heavens, saying all of those things to the Sahabi, right? That and the Prophet says, look, you guys at this moment in time are the best people on earth, right? And in another hadith, is no one who is given Bayatul Ridwan should ever enter the fire of hell. So we can see the status of Bayatul Ridwan, and again, it's Allah knew nothing had happened to Uthman ibn Affan, right? And Uthman returned very shortly. Allah knew all that, yet this was a test. he ordered Jibril to go down and make the people face their demons and make that choice, and to demonstrate that choice actively, and that was doing the bayah, making that pledge, right? Allah knows that Uthman's fine, but Allah is helping people to demonstrate to themselves and to Allah that actually they are sincere, right? Apart from that one person, all of them are sincere. And again, we see the status of people like Uthman ibn Affan, right? The blessings that he has, and we'll talk about in a second when he returns from Makkah. With the process of giving the pledge for himself, right? Putting his hand in his hand and saying, "This is for Uthman," right? And again, the people that finally assassinated Uthman. Again, there's at that time in the Khalife, there's lots of the proto-Kharijites and people working against the state. We've had the era of Abu Bakr Siddiq, we've had the era of Umar ibn al-Khattab, and then we've got the Khilafah of Uthman ibn Affan, and this political turmoil within the Islamic State, the Khilafah, and people are murmuring against Uthman. And again, one of the greatest blessings that he did was to not standardize, but to compile in a standardized format the Qur'an, and then so we know it, as we say, and it was written in Uthmani script, according to the dialect of the Prophet, and we've talked about compilation of the Qur'an many times before, but there are sort of rumors and there's negative propaganda against Uthman going around the Medina at the time, and so people of that group, they there's a famous hadith where they see Umar ibn al-Khattab's son having a large crowd, maybe doing a halakha or something like that. So they march up to Abdullah ibn Umer, and they say, "Oh, Ibn Umer, right? We've got some questions for you." Okay. So again, sort of very, you can tell by the tone they're very confrontational, right? Very black and white. And they say, "Look," and he goes, "Fine, go ahead, ask your questions. I ask you by Allah, did Uthman turn his back and run away on the Battle of Uhud?" Right? And then they said, well, "You asked," and Abdullah ibn Umar said, "Well, you asked me by Allah," and I answer, "Yes." So the chap said, "Okay, fine." So that's they feel proud, one up. Was Uthman absent at Badr? And then Ibn Umar said, "Well, he asked me by Allah." Yes, he was. And then they turn to him and say, "Well, wasn't he missing at Bayatul Ridwan?" I mean, these are the three major things: Uhud, Badr, Bayatul Ridwan. So Ibn Umar said, "You asked me by Allah," and I answered, "Yes." So then, the puffed up people, they're turning around and they say, "Look, Allahu Akbar," right? And they're sort of walking away, having proved their point and sort of generated more negative public opinion against Uthman ibn Affan. So as they're walking away, Ibn Umar, he shouts and calls them back, and he says, "Come back here." And so they turn around and he goes, "Well, ask for your first question." Yes, Uthman ibn Affan, he did flee Uhud, right? Like many other Sahabae, but he said, yes, he did flee Uhud, but Allah testified in Surah Al-Imran that he has forgiven them, so I testify that he's forgiven. And as for your second question, that he was married to Ruqayya binti Muhammad, right? Who, as we said, died the day they got back from Badr, right? And it was the Prophet ﷺ who commanded Uthman not to fight in Badr, but commanded Uthman to stay and look after his wife, the Prophet ﷺ's daughter, right? So he was under orders to not to participate in Badr. And in fact, he got the war booty, he got a share of the ghanima, and thus he is seen as a Badri. This is Ibn Umar saying this, right? he was commanded to stay in Medina, and he got share of the ghanima, and he is one of the Badriyun. And as for your third question, Bayatul Ridwan, it happened because of Uthman. Of course he's not going to be there, because the rumours were that he died. And Ibn Umar says the Prophet ﷺ put his own hand in his hand to take the oath on behalf of Uthman. So go back to your own people with all of this. So put these things into context. Don't take them out of context for your own political reasons. So again, and the Prophet ﷺ, he married two of his daughters to Uthman ibn Affan, and again, he said if he had more daughters, he would marry them all to Uthman. So again, Uthman's got this high status. The other thing to mention about the giving of the bay'ah is, as Allah references, they sat under the tree. And then Umer ibn al-Khattab, later on, he chopped down the tree. And the reasons are quite obvious. There's a famous hadith that we've talked about, Jabir ibn Abdullah. So he goes, look, when I was a young man, or he became blind later on. He goes, if only I could see, I would show you exactly where the tree we sat under was. And again, within a few weeks or months of the revelation, obviously the tree is going to have a sense of importance amongst the Muslims, because Allah references the tree in the Qur'an, and the Prophet sat leaning on that tree or under that tree, and the people that were there had Allah's pleasure. And as I say, within a few decades, they were decorating the trees on the plain of Hudaybiyah, and some one tree in particular, and they'd actually built a little masjid near the tree or next to the tree, and so some of the Sahabae, when they saw this, they were astounded. So, well, what's going on here, right? One of the this, I think it was a student of Ibn Abbas, right? He asked, well, what's all this about? And then the reply from Sa'id ibn Musayyid was that, look, my father were amongst those that took the Bayatul Ridwan, and when we went back the next year, we couldn't recognize the tree. We would argue amongst, these are the Sahabae, they would argue amongst themselves which is the tree, yet these people think that this is the actual tree, because when a year goes by or time goes by, you're in the heat of the moment, and you when you leave and you go back, the environment changes a bit. Yet some Muslims, they had acknowledged one particular tree, and so they attached more significance to it. So some sort of superstition or emotional practices, they were seen rubbing their backs on the tree, and obviously within time and within given enough time and ignorance, they would start worshipping near the tree. They may even start worshipping the tree, right? And thinking the tree in itself is holy and has powers, right? And so in the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, when he is Khalife, he got to hear about this, the tree, the masjid, the practices of the people who were close to the Prophet ﷺ, right? That generation, and he ordered that the tree be cut down for obvious reasons, because he doesn't want, despite it being mentioned, he doesn't want it to become a nexus for superstition. And again, you can see the foresightedness of Umar ibn al-Khattab, that there are some minor practices that disapproved of, but it could easily go the wrong way. And there's no mystical power surrounding that tree. It was just a tree that happened to be there. The Prophet was taking the bayah, as opposed to the barakah that's associated with the Prophet, right? So again, when people sort of, we talked about when the Prophet was doing wudu, they're catching his drops and they're rubbing it over him, or when he's rinsing his mouth out, they're taking some of that water and rubbing it on them. That's the barakah associated with the Prophet, and that's acceptable. But where he sat, or where his feet touch the ground, thinking there's something special or holy about that, and then starting practices of worship, then you can see how human beings can get easily led astray and by attaching some holiness or mystical powers to these things and not thinking rationally about them. So again, Umer chopped the tree down and put a stop to all of that. Another thing that happened, we're not exactly sure when, but it's probably around about this time after, is that one of the Sahabae, Qab bin Ujra, Qab, he was dressed as a pilgrim. He was in ihram, and he had really bad lice in his hair, and it was causing him a lot of problems. And so, he didn't know what to do, but obviously it was affecting him and his health. And the Prophet came to know of this, and he goes, "Well, why didn't you tell me? Why don't you just shave your head because of this illness? Shave your head due to this illness, and then as a fidyah, as a compensation, sacrifice a sheep or fast for 3 days or feed 60 needy people," right? So and again, this is part of the fiqh of Hajj and Umrah. If there are things, there are these expiations, that if things you can't perform certain mandatory actions, then for valid reasons you can like shaving your hair early, you can shave your hair, but pay the fidyah, right, which is sacrificing a sheep, fasting for 3 consecutive days, or feeding 60 poor people. And again, Allah reveals a verse related to this in the Qur'an: "And whosoever of you is ill or has an ailment on his scalp necessitating shaving, then he must pay fidyah of either fasting 3 days, or giving sadaqah, feeding the poor persons, or offering sacrifice." And that's in Surah Al-Baqarah. So again, that's clarifying the rules of Umrah. Again, one of the other rules of Umrah, which we'll come on to later on, is the fact that your Umrah can be counted even if you don't go and do the Umrah physically, to do the Tawaaf and the Sa'i, because the Muslims were prevented from that for external factors outside their control. Their intention was right. They got as far as they could. They weren't allowed in. For example, if the Kaaba is shut down because of war or because of some virus or pandemic, you made the intention, but when you got there you had no access to it, then if you then fulfill the rites of the pilgrimage, shaving your hair, sacrificing, it counts as you having done Umrah. So likewise with this person, he was allowed to shave his head. But anyway, getting back to the story of Uthman, this is a big deal. They've given a pledge of fighting, a pledge of war, fighting to the death. And this, obviously, news reached the people of Makkah, and they freaked out, because they know what's going to come next. And when the Muslims have resolved to fight, even though they don't have the weaponry, the people of Makkah really knew that they have to really do something. So they tracked down Uthman ibn Affan, and they send him back. And so to quell the rumours that we haven't killed him, right? Here he is, he's safe and sound. And so they deliver him safely back to Hudaybiyah. So the Muslims in Hudaybiyah, they're camped out, they're seeing all of this stuff, and they're, some of them, it's human nature. They're all psyched up, they all want to go to the Kaaba, and Uthman gets dispatched to go to Makkah, and some of them say, look how lucky he is, he gets to go there, and I bet he's gone inside and he's done the Tawaaf, and he's satisfied his own self, right? And so these sort of chitter chatters, from the naysayers, even amongst the best of the best, the Sahabae, you have these rumours because of their own frustration of not being able to do that. And then so the news reaches the Prophet ﷺ, and he goes, no. I don't think that he would do the Tawaaf. How can he do it when we haven't? Basically, I don't think he had the audacity to do Tawaaf before us, right? And here the Prophet ﷺ, again, is protecting the honour of Uthman. He says, look, I know his adab, I know him, right? He's my son-in-law. He ain't going to do that, right? And but the other Muslims are saying, but why wouldn't he do that, right? Of course he's going to do that. He's protected and he's in Makkah. He hasn't been there for years. What's stopping him from doing that, right? They've been exiled for 5-6 years. They've not had the opportunity to do that. And obviously, the first chance you get, of course you're going to do that. That was their thinking in frustration. So then, as he's being delivered back and he's entering the camp of the Muslims, some of them going up to him say, look, okay, so you got to go. Have you satisfied yourself with the Kaaba, right? And then Uthman really taken aback by that. He goes, what an evil thought you had of me. Did you really think I would do Tawaaf whilst the Prophet ﷺ is sitting here? Wallahi, if I stayed in Makkah for a whole year, I would not do Tawaaf until the Prophet did it before me. And again, just really in your face, saying to these naysayers, look, don't be ridiculous. Don't you know me by now? I wouldn't dare of doing anything like that. And again, it shows why the Prophet ﷺ and Umer, they recommended him for this task. He would get the job done. He would go. He would negotiate. He would meet the converts who were in prison, and he would do it with dignity. He's not going to sell out the Muslims, and he's going to stay true to the principles of Islam and to the honor of the Prophet and the other Muslims. So he goes back, and then there's panic in Makkah, because they know that even though they've sent Uthman back, they've all pledged to fight. They're not willing to let the Muslims come in, and if the Muslims obviously come in, right, to do Umrah or to fight, there's going to be bloodshed. So they are in a panic, and some of the books of Seerah say that they were trembling with fear. They don't know what to do. They no doubt called their parliament. They gathered in their nadwa, and decided that they need to negotiate. They need to stop the possibility of them coming and offset any fighting or war. So quickly, without really having any proper game plan, they sent someone out by the name of Mikras ibn Hafs, right? And it was just like a panic decision. You go. You're over there. Why don't you go? So he dashes off to the camp of the Muslims in Hudaybiyah, and again, it's like, just make sure they don't come. Buy some time, stall them. Don't give anything, but don't stall them until we think of what we need to do. So Mikras, he goes and he's basically stalling. He's not seriously negotiating. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he saw Mikras, he said to the Sahabi, as Mikras is coming in, this guy, he's an evil man, right? And he is evil, and he had evil in his heart. Although he did make one promise later on about protecting Abu Jandal. But anyway, Mikras, so he's stalling them. He's not listening. He's just being very unreasonable. So negotiations are happening, but there's no conclusions that the conditions were completely unacceptable. So in the meantime, the Quraish then they decide, okay, fine, we need to send a proper delegation with a proper terms of reference and proper outcomes. And they chose one of the most senior-most people of the Nadwa, of the parliament, one of the sort of ministers of, you could say, in the cabinet, one of the tribal chiefs, Suhail bin Amr. We talked about Suhail bin Amr before. He was one of the chiefs who was captured in the Battle of Badr, and when he was brought back, the Prophet ﷺ, kept him as a prisoner in his own house. And then when the Prophet's wife saw Suhail, this noble chief, she just reflexly shrieked out, "What are you doing here? What shame are you bringing upon us? You should have fought to the death. Someone like you is a prisoner in your shackles." And the Prophet, he overheard that, and he was really taken aback. He said, Are you egging him on to fight Allah and his messenger? And then she really apologized. Look, it was a reflex. I just freaked out by seeing someone as great and noble as Suhail bin Amr, who is one of the most eloquent leaders of the Quraish in chains. But anyway, so they decide to send Suhail. He's got his terms of reference, right? The red line is no Umrah this year, right? Completely no Umrah, and maybe they were also given him a list of other conditions. But the red line is they cannot enter Makkah this year because of the humiliation it would cause the Arabs of the Quraish amongst the other tribal leaders. They'll be a laughing stock. So no Umrah, and then if they really insist, we'll let them come next year. But it cannot happen this year. So Suhail, the official high-level delegation, is coming again. They're in panic mode because they want to offset the war or fighting. So the Prophet he sees Suhail, and the Prophet then says, Suhail has come. Allah has made things easy for you now. So he's announcing it to the Sahabi, right? So we'll come to some arrangement through Suhail. And the reason he says that is that Suhail, the word comes from the Arabic, which means to make things easy, right? So the Prophet ﷺ, he's linking the two things. He's putting a positive spin, essentially. And we see this throughout the Seerah, where the Prophet ﷺ, he's encouraging the Muslims to be positive, glass half full. Will always be optimistic. Always look on the positive side of things. And again, in other verses, other hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, that there are no such thing as superstitions or bad omens, right? And believing in omens is a type of shirk, where you're ascribing some supernatural powers or phenomena to something other than Allah, walking under a ladder. That somehow alters your fate, right? In a negative way. That's a bad omen, right? Smashing glass has, or a mirror, in itself has some mystical, superstitious way of affecting your qadr, right? Seeing, a black cat walk across your pathway brings evil to you. So it's saying, look, there's no such thing as bad omens or superstitions like that, and believing in these omens is a type of shirk. So then he clarifies that. But I like positive optimism. And so they say, well, what do you mean? What's the difference? Right? And the Prophet says a good word or a good phrase that someone hears. Right? So we're allowed to ascribe positivity to events, so long as we link them to Allah and feel or interpret the event in a positive way, put a positive spin on an event we are seeing or encountering. Here the Prophet he is seeing Suhail bin Amr come, and he's saying, this is good news, because think Allah's making things easy for you. So so thinking positively, putting a positive spin on events is part of our deen, as long as we link it to Allah. And this is all to do with the qadr of Allah, and our relationship with the things that we cannot control. And again, being a Muslim, it is having that power of positivity where you generate positive feelings, positive vibes, and you ascribe them to Allah. That, and because of that positivity, we generate thankfulness and gratitude. So it's about, and Prophet here is teaching us how to change our mindset from being negative and superstitious and bad omens and going into a negative spiral of defeatism, to actually always thinking positive or being optimistic, and even when there is a calamity, putting your trust in Allah and being positive about it. And Allah's given us so many ways of saying, look, you pricked by a thorn, it hurts, it bleeds, but look on the positive side, Allah is using that to expiate some of your sins, right? So yes, every cloud has a silver lining. You've got to be positive about these things, right? It is part of our deen. It is recommended. It's sunnah. It's mustahab, right? Where we think positively of our relationship with Allah and Allah's protection of us, right? So we can look at things and put a positive sign or a spin or a message on that, as long as it's linked to Allah. So Suhail comes from the root word to make things easy. So the Prophet is linking that to the fact we're in tough negotiations. I didn't ask them to send Suhail. Suhail is sent to me. It's outside my control, but I will interpret that as being good, because Suhail, the root of the word Suhail comes from to make things easy. So this is a sign from Allah that things are going to be made easy. So the Prophet is teaching us how to look at things in a positive way, right? And so Suhail, he arrives, and he is the highest level emissary delegation to come for negotiations with the Prophet ﷺ, right? And as I said, he's one of the chiefs. He's one of the parliamentarians in the Nadi, the Najwa, right? And so he's approaching, probably with an entourage as well, to meet the Prophet ﷺ, to stop the war, because they've pledged to fight, and to prevent the Umrah. These are his goals. As he's approaching to the negotiations, and again, the Prophet, he's surrounded by his entourage, his senior cabinet members, his viziers, his lieutenants, his advisors, chief advisors. Suhail's probably coming with a small entourage as well. So it's a proper formal negotiation. As he's approaching, no, it wasn't this. This was actually not on this again. They were going back to when Suhail was captured, and we'll reference this a bit later on. When Suhail was captured, because he is an orator, he is a wordsmith, and again, that's one of the reasons why he's been chosen by the Quraish to be their chief negotiator, because he has a way with words. And when when Umar ibn al-Khattab had seen Suhail captured, he said, "Ya Rasulullah, let me cut off his tongue so he doesn't speak against us," because again, he was one of the chief propagandists against the Muslims. Because it's a personal fight for him, because his own children have become Muslims. One of his children defected on the Battle of Badr, and the humiliation, and his other son wants to become Muslim, and this is a personal thing for Suhail, his enmity against the Prophet ﷺ, and the way he talks against the Muslims. The Prophet ﷺ replied to Umar, I am the Prophet, and we have not been commanded to mutilate people. Right? It's forbidden, this type of torture. We don't do that. He's our prisoner. We don't cut off his tongue. Right? And then he turns to him and says, perhaps one day he'll say something that will please you. Right? And again, Prophet ﷺ always putting a positive spin on things. Right? And that came true later on when after the Prophet ﷺ died, people were thinking of reneging on Islam, and he is the one who convinced the people of Makkah not to do that. But we'll come on to that later on. I think we'll finish there today, and we'll talk about the actual start of the negotiations next time, inshallah. So thank you for listening, and inshallah catch up next time. Do remember me in your du'as, do remember the Ummah in your du'as, and if you've got any questions, queries, comments, do send them in, on YouTube, WhatsApp, Facebook, etc. So jazakallah khair, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاك الله خير everybody. Assalamu alaikum.